Nero, who was one of the Roman emperors in the first century, is famous for burning Christians to light his gardens paths.
Light his gardens?
Yeah, he would burn them as torches. And the Christians were these really easy targets because they were these unusual people who became a really easy target for, like, a scapegoat for the problems.
Hold on, man. I'm still stuck on the garden thing.
Yeah.
So would he, like, stick them on a stake and hold them like a tiki torch?
Yeah, the story is that they would be tied to stakes along the rows of his gardens, and then they would be lit the gardens at night. But remember, this is the guy who burned Rome. He was known to be a little bit nuts, as were some other Roman emperors.
See, this is why I can't take Christians or Christians who are attempting to get their doctorate like Wes Huff very seriously, because he will become just another apologist who accepts information that should not be accepted. He is claiming. Now let's look at what is actually true about what he said first. Did Nero blame Christians for the Great Fire of Rome in 64 CE? Yes, he blamed Christians. And that's very important to notice that he did blame Christians for it, even though the majority of people understood that it was Nero himself. We know Nero himself set the fire. Nero then organized people to try to put out the fire and to help and that sort of thing. We know that that part is true. So we know these things about Nero in 64. But then there is you burn Christians along the streets as a light source. So first, let's get into the political bullshit of this. You see, the belief in this comes from Tacitus. Tacitus is probably the lone source of information that we have concerning Nero and him doing these things as far as lighting Christians as lamps in his garden along the streets. Tacitus was known to be a supporter of the enemies of Nero. And you would think that at the time frame that Tacitus is writing this, that it wouldn't necessarily matter that he would be writing about the Julio-Claudians, writing about Nero in a negative way. But remember, even according to the Christians who were alive around the time frame that Tacitus was doing his writing in around 80 CE. So this is being written almost 20 years and 20 years plus after the so-called events. But Nero had already been disposed. He is no longer emperor. He had suffered a head wound and died. But there was a belief at the time, and this is the beast that is in or the Antichrist in your Bible in Revelation, that he would come back, that he would somehow be resurrected and come back with a Parthian army and retake the Roman Empire. And of course, Christians were afraid of this, and this is why it's written such in Revelations. The 666 in the Greek or the 616 in the Latin is the name of Caesar Nero. It is not someone to come in our lifetime. Now, so Tacitus still had reason to write negatively about the Julio-Claudians since he was favored by the Flavians. And at this time frame, the Flavians were in power. So the Julio-Claudian dynasty needed to be dismantled. The love affair of them had to be taken apart. So most scholars who are not apologists recognize that what Tacitus was writing was hyperbole. He was writing an exaggeration. He was writing something that wasn't necessarily true, but people will listen to it, believe it. It would indicate just how of a disgusting of a person Nero was. And I'm not disagreeing that Nero was a disgusting human being. But let's be real. It is not only Christians that were persecuted during this time frame under Nero or during the 1st and 2nd century of the Roman Empire. Christians were persecuted. Jews were persecuted. Magians were persecuted. Druids were persecuted. You see, many other religions were persecuted, but one thing that all of these religions shared was that they were small and they were poor, and they were also poor in political power. So each one of them are easier to scapegoat because they were poor and poor in power. Oh, Christianity being so young, they were easy to scapegoat. So it wasn't as if he was persecuting Christianity because he felt a threat from Christianity. Now, the additional things that caused persecution of Jews and Christians was the fact that Jews and Christians believed in only one God and that they would not accept the belief in other gods at this time frame. And so they would not accept Caesar as a god. So Nero was not considered a god. Vespasian, Titus, none of them were considered gods, Domitian. So they were persecuted for that reason as well. Now, the Jews had another reason that they were persecuted, and that is because they believed that the Messiah was yet to come and that he would be a military general and would overthrow the Roman government in the Levant and then bring about a 1,000-year reign or a kingdom under a new kingdom of Israel. So Christianity with 1,000-year reign, but a new kingdom under Israel that's supposed to last forever. Now, that mentality was seen as a threat to the Roman government, hence why Christianity itself was created by the Roman government in order to create a more docile version of Judaism. But all in all, West, if he is studying for his doctorate, this is information that he is privy to. It is not hidden. It is not something that he can't find other PhD papers on, that he cannot find documentaries on. He cannot find the actual writings or anything of that sort. This is all privileged information. I mean, this information is not privileged information. It's non-privileged information that almost anyone can get their hands on. Yet, he still spouts out the apologist lines of the sorry, woeful Christians and, oh, they were torched. That doesn't work. I hope that none of you ever experience a human body set on fire. One, it is one of the worst smells that you could ever experience. It is a horrid smell. And I know that their streets and lives weren't as clean as ours are right now, but in a garden of the palace, it would have been nice. It would have been clean, immaculate. To burn human flesh would have been a horrible smell. That's the first thing. The second thing, once the pitch or straw has been burned out, the human body does not combust and maintains a flame. The human body will smolder and it would just be smoke. And so to use it as a light source would be dumb as hell. It wouldn't be used as a light source. To torture people, did they torture Christians? Did they torture Jews? Did they torture Druids? Did they torture other people? Of course they did. Did they crucify them, have them fight in the arenas and all these sorts of things? Yes, the Romans did this. But to burn them as light posts is obscene and stupid and doesn't work as a reasonable source of lighting at night. Now, before I go on this video, let's not forget, those were the groups that were persecuted under the Romans prior to the Roman becoming Christian. After Rome became Christian, the Romans then persecuted Gnostic Christians, then they persecuted the Jews, and then they persecuted the believers in the Greek religion, the Kemetic religion, Serapis, the Roman religion, the Druids, and all other pagan religions. What they call pagan. Then they persecuted the Muslims. Then they persecuted their own Christians in the Inquisitions. Then they persecuted every indigenous religion that they encountered. And then as they continued to spread Christianity into the New Rome, which became Europe and North Africa, they persecuted those indigenous religions all over the world. So although Christians suffered about 300 years of persecution under Rome, the rest of the world has suffered about 1,700 years of persecution under Christians. So always remember, you got to free yourself to be yourself because your greatness is non-negotiable. Good journey, good vibrations. I'm on an Air Force base.